So it seems that the monstrously powerful new Tyranid Crusher Stampede is indeed for match play 40k. So let's look at some devastating new combos possible for the bugs. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the strategy focused 40k channel, where today we're looking at a bunch of new Tyranid combos, largely revolving around the Tyranid monsters. A few days back I made a video on the new Tyranid Crusher Stampede, a brand new army of renown that came out in the White Dwarf in December, and the buffs that it gives the Tyranid monsters are just so crazily strong that it seems that it now could be one of the new best ways to play Tyranids. Now we know it is indeed for unrestricted match play and is tournament legal. I just feel it's a bit more worth doing a deep dive into some of the datasheets it affects, as it basically takes half the Tyranid codex and massively dials up the power on it. I did go over the Crusher Stampede in that previous video, so feel free to look at that, but here's just a really basic overview. You can't take any swarms or any models with 2 wounds or fewer, so no gaunts or gene stealers or things. You must take at least as many monster tag units as non-monsters. The whole army must be from the same Hive Fleet, and that Hive Fleet's armies don't ever gain their own Hive Fleet adaptation, but they get a far better benefit instead. As a reward, the main benefit is for monster keyword units, which gain a crazy cocktail of buffs of a 5+ invul, -1 damage on any attacks, and for objectives they count as the number of wounds they have remaining when determining the numbers, against a lot of weapons that could easily be double the durability or even more, and the objective thing means that they're often going to win objectives unless the opponent actually has objectives secured. As well as that, you gain access to a few warlord traits, some stratagems, including a really quite powerful one for dealing out a bunch of mortal wounds when you charge, and also a few new psychic powers, things like +D3 attacks or a 4+ invul save for a monster. Finally, the non-monster units also get a buff, getting a 5+ invul as well, which is pretty nice on the multi-wound infantry. Usually that's going to be better than most of the Hive Fleet tactics. Now obviously this buffs basically every single monster out there, but I thought a few might be worthy of special mention. First up, the terror from the deep that is the Mawloc gets a real buff out of this. The Mawloc gets 2 deep strike within 1 inch of enemy models, and then deals out some mortal wounds to anything it's nearby. Perhaps more importantly for 9th edition missions though, now it counts as 12 models on an objective, it's quite likely to steal that objective unless the opponent does have Obsec there. Even for a model with a fairly big base, 1 inch is quite hard to screen out. If you have a Mawloc coming in, it certainly seems worth it to see if you could just squeeze it onto an objective where you might be able to steal it from the opponent. I would bear in mind that you can't make the Mawloc Obsec with Leviathan before doing this, which would have made the ploy even more nasty, but that's probably for the best. Just in general though, I think that the Mawloc gets quite a bit out of the toughness boost as well, as perhaps the other main attraction of Mawlocs is just to act as a bit of a speed bump to hold back the enemy lines. Pop them up just within 1 inch of something that wanted to move forward, then they'll have to chew through your Mawloc before they can keep on going. With 12 wounds and a 3+ save, it wasn't really all that big a deal. Anti-tank weapons do come fairly cheaply in 9th, but gaining a 5+ invul and -1 damage is going to make that far more of a chore. Even just throwing one into the enemy backfield could be pretty annoying, if you know it's got the possibility to charge and eat an enemy objective camping unit and maybe take the home field. You're kind of forced to actually have to deal with it, and it's not that easy to deal with that defensive profile at the cheap points cost. The formation also seems like perhaps the best way to make Tyranid warriors work too. They're certainly a useful troops choice already at just 17 points per model for a synapse bubble, and quite a decent amount of toughness 4 wounds for the price, and perhaps doubly so now they have that very cheap 15-point synaptic link to make 1 Tyranid organism hit on +1. For your 17 points, their weapon skill 3+ and ballistic skill 4+, strength and toughness 4, 3 wounds, 3 attacks, and have a 4+ save. The Crusher Stampede really works for them on a number of different levels. First up, that 5+ invul is exactly what they want with their fairly low save. It's going to be far harder to scrape them off objectives with moderate AP weapons now. They feel kind of required for the army. Getting some objectives secured is really quite nice to get in alongside the monsters with the wounds counting as the number of models. If you've got a Tyranid warrior unit paired with a monster of some sort, then it's very unlikely that the enemy is going to be able to take down that objective. They'll also be good for filling things like battalions or patrol detachments to get you a few refunded command points. On top of that, they do seem one of the best ways to actually make a fighty warrior squad work, not just a more utility unit. For a 1 command point pre-game investment, you can make them a bit more dangerous with weapon skill 2+ and ballistic skill 3+, and I feel that when they're hitting a bit better, you can maybe justify some more war gear on them, maybe things like rending claws, bone swords, or death spitters. Depending on the squad size, it's either 1 or 2 command points for a transhuman physiology type rule. That's only toughness 4 with 3 wounds, they're often going to get anti-tank weapons focused on them. If those anti-tank weapons are only wounding on a 4+, then they're not going to kill very many warriors. If you have an absolute critical objective that you really need to hold till the end of the turn, parking a big blob of 9 on an objective and popping their stratagem for a couple of command points is going to make them a real pain to remove. Finally, they also have a 1 command point shooting melee stratagem. Maybe could be handy to justify death spitters a bit more. I think they are a little bit on the pricey side, and you wouldn't really want the investment being made completely useless as soon as the squad is tagged. My first instincts though say that it might well just be a more melee focused squad that takes the fall. Say for example you could have a unit for 180 points and 1 command point, that'd get you 9 with dual bone swords and weapon skill 2+. Defensively that's 27 wounds at toughness 4, 4+, 5+, and transhuman access. For that points cost that's really quite durable. And then if the enemy does stray too close to your objective holders, you do pack a decent countercharge threat as well, killing something like 5 standard Space Marines on average, or about 7 wounds to a toughness 7 vehicle. Not the most dangerous combat unit out there, but certainly not the worst either. You could even go further, giving them the synaptic link so they can make another squad +1 to hit, or perhaps pairing them with a Tyranid Prime and his synaptic link so that any wound rolls of 6 auto wound the enemy. I quite like the way that the Crusher Stampede pairs well with the existing Tyranid tricks, in particular the Leviathan supplement and the Swarmlord. I think the Leviathan will easily be the go-to pick for the Crusher Stampede hive fleets, as the trait doesn't actually matter. All the massive support that Leviathan gets from the stratagems is by far the best choice. You lose the 6+ feel no pain, but their Warlord traits are still pretty handy. You can use Swarm Leader on your Hive Guard, or redeploy some really big monsters to get optimal position for the first strike. As well as that, maybe 2 of the most key stratagems are the 1 command point automatic death throws. If there's ever a list that really rewards you throwing your monsters into combat, then it's this one. And if the enemy is just a little bit too overambitious with the countercharge, you might well be handing out mortal wounds to a whole bunch of units. The other Leviathan one that I think is really relevant is the 1 command points to put Obsec on 1 unit in the command phase. As monsters can be a whole ton of wounds now, this can be just one that's really handy to turn on if you do think it's going to make the difference between swinging and objective. Throw that on something like an 18 wound Hierodule or Dimecheron, and that objective is yours. The Swarmlord also absolutely loves this detachment. He'll enjoy the -1 damage a lot himself, and it does make him a bit less of a liability. It's going to take more effort and commitment to snipe him down, compared with how he would be in another Tyranid list. His double move shenanigans are excellent on really big hitters, and could be quite important for trying to make sure that something's charging every turn, so you are getting full use out of that big mortal wound strat. The one where you charge, and then depending on how many wounds you have left, you might deal a whole load of mortals to the enemy. Never mind the fact that he's got psychic powers of his own and his own melee threat too. It already basically auto-includes status in the Tyranid army, and I think in this list he's going to be even more worth it. Next up though, I think we perhaps have the unit that might be just one of the single most efficient damage dealers that Tyranids have now. Both of the big Forge World Hierodules are great, but I'd argue that the Scythed one maybe takes the win. It's 235 points for a heavy support monster, and it kind of feels like a super kind of effects on steroids. A 12-inch movement means it'll get towards the enemy far faster. It's got weapon skill and ballistic skill 3+, so a bit more accurate. Strength and toughness 8, a massive 18 wounds, 6 attacks, leadership 8, and a 3+ save. Having the 3+ armor means that it makes great use of both the 5+ invul and the -1 damage, and this thing is just insanely tanky for 235 points for the amount of wounds that it brings. To average to bring down one of these guys for 235 points, you need a massive 22 Space Marine Devastators with las cannons taking aim at it in a single shooting phase. Never mind if you're firing something less efficient that wounds it on 5s, or you happen to have a damage 2 weapon which is going to get cut in half by the -1 damage. Damage-wise, it isn't going to solo take out the enemy army in 1 turn, but it's got a really nice bioacid spray for 3d6 auto hits at 18 inches. Strength 6, AP -2, damage 1 will clear infantry nicely, and if you're firing at 2 wound infantry, you could maybe think about targeting it with pathogenic slime. Its melee is great for dealing with enemy heavy hitters, 6 attacks at strength 10, AP -3, and a big damage D3+3, and you get to reroll hit rolls of 1 as well. In particular, I think it's just this thing's massive wounds characteristic that really sells it in the Crusher Stampede. At full health, that'll be 18 wounds on objectives. Of course, that will diminish as it does get wounded. And if you have one that's charging at anywhere near full health, then 1 command point could make it for a very, very easy 6 mortal wounds. You'd be pretty likely to get the full 6, even if you were charging something that was toughness 8. Those powerful attacks are also quite a good target for the extra attack psychic power that you've got. And High Fleet Leviathan's auto death throws are great on this too. As being a bit of a bog, it goes down with a much heavier collapse and has the potential for 3 mortal wounds on all units around it. Overall, having a few of these things just seems like a pretty excellent battle line for Tyranids right now. Perhaps the main issues that it has are that it's got an absolutely enormous base. You might sometimes struggle to move it around certain bits of terrain. And of course it comes from Forge World, so it costs $175 or around £116 sterling. Might well be one to convert up a suitably sized alternative for, or perhaps find a 3D printed stand-in. This guy certainly isn't alone out of the really big bugs though. You could think about the barbed Hierodule for a few points more for strength 8 cannons and a 2+ save, or the Dimacaron with its jumping over terrain ability and its spine more to get itself a feel no pain save. It doesn't get as much out of the invul as it has one already, but at least you have a bit more reliability when traversing the battlefield. At the current points cost though, it does seem like these enormous Tyranid Forge World bugs are some of the strongest things that you can run in the army. Speaking of which, we do have one more to touch on, and that's the fearsome Harridan, the 700 point Lord of War choice, and already a fairly efficient damage dealer and a unit that was really hard to take down. It's a 45-inch move aircraft with weapon skill and ballistic skill 3+, strength and toughness 8, a crazy 34 wounds, 5 attacks, leadership 9 and a 3+ save. It was already quite common to be able to take the adaptive physiology for a 5+ invul on this guy, but I guess getting that for free certainly doesn't hurt. Really though, it's that -1 damage coupled by all of those wounds that's really going to make a difference. Also packing a -1 to hit while it's in the air, this thing's already ridiculously hard to take down, never mind now. If you want to get things even sillier, you could have a couple of Psychers, one cast the 4+ invul power from the detachment, and one cast the 5+ feel no pain power from Catalyst. To be honest though, they might well be better served souping up the rest of the army and making that even tougher, as I feel like the Harridan's already going to be hard to take down as it is. Maybe the bigger issue for the Harridan is whether or not you can do enough damage output to justify its massive points cost. It is over a third of your points cost in 2k point games already, but hopefully it can achieve enough with those dire bio cannons, 16 shots at strength 10, AP -3 and damage 3, getting +1 to wound if you take a few mortals yourself. If you do drop out of aircraft mode, you can also charge as well. You don't get all that many attacks, but when they do land home, they hit with a big damage 6. Plus again, with that many crazy wounds, you are almost guaranteed the 6 mortal wounds from the impact hit stratagem, if you do need to chew through a clutch of infantry. Overall, it just seems like a massive threat that you might well struggle to ignore, and the rest of the army it's supporting should be even tougher to your guns. Finally, just a few more thoughts out of the many and varied Tyranid monsters that can be affected by this. One perhaps less obvious choice that could be more useful is the Harpy or the Hive Crone, maybe more for an objectives and harassment unit like the Mawloc. This thing's got a big 30-inch move, fire out a few shots with its ranged attacks, and then hopefully charge and do that 6 mortal wound impact hit stratagem on an isolated enemy unit. There's not going to be a lot on the board that can hide well from this with that massive move range, and what's even better is that they don't have the aircraft keyword as well, so they can contest and even take objectives, starting out counting at 12 models, and you can use the Leviathan stratagem on them to count them as OBSEC, giving you a very real possibility of just zooming halfway across the board and stealing an objective from the opponent. Being annoying to scrape off as well with the -1 damage and 5+ invul certainly doesn't hurt. I feel like the impact hits one might be one of the most important things on these guys, as it basically transforms a unit that's quite bad in combat to a unit that's really dangerous. Otherwise, the terribly scary Hive Guards seem perhaps even better in this detachment. They won't be able to get any rerolls from Hive Fleets like Kronos for example, but they can still make use of the Hive Fleet Leviathan Swarm Leader rule, and if any enemy units get to shoot or charge them, they'll be that bit more durable to their attacks with a 5+ invul. I'd say perhaps the bigger issue for the Hive Guard is they might not have as many screens without gaunts and things, though I feel that Tyranid Warriors could perhaps still do in a pinch for that, at just over 50 points for a unit of 3. Perhaps Venomthropes and Malanthropes could be worth another look as well. With so many Stampede durability buffs, they do have units that can be put out right in the open, and layering the invuls, the -1 damage and the -1 to hit could be a seriously powerful counter to enemy shooting. Venomthropes in particular I think are a bit more viable now they have a 5+ invul save with this. I think their main issue before was that they just typically get shot and die before whatever they were protecting got shot, so now they're a bit more durable and you might well be able to hide them behind terrain as well. The Mighty Hive Tyrant is a lot more easy to justify, just like the Swarm Lord with -1 damage. It's a lot more painful to try and focus down compared with what he was, and I think it could be an interesting combo to try and get the plus 2d3 attacks on him, with the Warlord trait that gives them it innately, plus the psychic power that does basically the same, even if you just use it on something simple like Scything Talons with Murderous Size. That could give you 8 attacks hitting on 2s, all at strength 7, AP -4 and damage 4. Pretty good for dealing with virtually anything that isn't toughness 8. I'm sure though, with all these combos and things, there'll be plenty of Tyranid players out there who are just itching for an excuse to put a whole load of card effects on the table. Ranking up a whole ton of them alongside Old One Eye sounds like a fun idea to me. I'm not sure if the numbers quite compare too favourably compared with the Forge World beasties, but still having that many Tyranid models rushing at you across the table seems pretty intimidating. So as always, let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Are there any other cool combos that I've missed that you think are going to be really relevant now this formation is a thing? And are we going to see these lists stomping tournaments in 40k kind of soon? If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, where I'll certainly keep all the regular 40k content like this coming, with new videos out just about every day. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel lately, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page, and you can find that down in the video description below. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, such as seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways, with a chance to win some really big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, then the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.